When we look at a crowd, a team, or a society, we naturally assume we are looking at a large collection of individual human psychologies. But a group operates as a completely different structural entity. Group size is not a measure of quantity. It represents a shift in the physical geometry of interaction. Sociologist George Simmel observed that a dyad, a group of two, is a pure, fragile system. It operates as a tight feedback loop. Signal is high and accountability is absolute. If one node leaves, the entire system collapses. Add just one person, and the mathematical connections alter completely. Interaction shifts from linear to networked. Moving from a dyad to a triad crosses a threshold. At this exact size, politics, power dynamics, and strategy become mathematically inevitable. In a network of three, new mechanics instantly appear. The most significant is the possibility of a coalition, where two nodes align their interests against the third. This structure forces emergent roles to surface. The first is the mediator, a node that resolves conflict to stabilize the larger system. The second is the tertius gaudens, the third who benefits. This node stays neutral, exploiting the conflict between the other two for its own advantage. The third is the divide-and-rule actor, who intentionally manufactures conflict within the network to gain structural control over it. To understand human behavior, studying psychology is insufficient. We have to deconstruct the algorithm of social interaction as a set of constraints placed on human bandwidth. We can map an individual's operating parameters within this system using an object-oriented programming metaphor. A person's identity separates who they are from what they do. A status is the static position you hold in the social graph, the class definition. You might simultaneously hold the status of engineer, parent, and team lead. A role is the execution logic tied to that status. These are the dynamic expectations and functions you must perform. When the demands of the manager class require you to stay late, and the demands of the parent class require you to be home, the functions crash. This is role conflict, a cross-class collision. If that same manager class is expected to simultaneously cut costs and boost team morale, the system experiences role strain. You are overloading a single class with incompatible functions. Identity fragmentation and burnout are rarely individual weaknesses. They are predictable structural failures caused by an over-constrained social architecture. As these individual nodes scale up into massive, highly interconnected networks, the system begins to distort its own inputs. Groups systematically warp three specific variables: effort, incentives, and thinking. The first failure mode is social loafing. Because responsibility diffuses across the network, individual nodes exert less effort. The math reveals that total group effort is always less than the sum of individual capacity. The output is reduced by invisible slack. The second failure is the social dilemma, an incentive collapse that functions like a generalized multiplayer prisoner's dilemma. If individual nodes hoard knowledge to stay valuable, they achieve short-term individual gain, but they threaten the long-term stability and efficiency of the entire system. Without structurally visible contributions and shared rewards, scaling a network inherently degrades the performance of every node inside it. The third distortion affects thinking. Conformity is a judgment failure, where a node overrides its own local data to align with global network pressure. This scales into groupthink, a highly dysfunctional form of conformity that causes a total decision system collapse by systematically suppressing dissent. In the lead-up to the Bay of Pigs invasion, advisors refused to challenge flawed assumptions. Leadership prioritized consensus, ignoring clear warnings of strategic failure. In engineering terms, groupthink creates a closed-loop system. It drifts toward failure because it lacks an independent error correction mechanism. Groups do not magically amplify intelligence. Unless independent review loops are intentionally engineered into the system, they amplify bias, laziness, and illusions of certainty. To fix these scaling failures, society attempts to strictly rationalize human systems. Sociologist Max Weber defined this as formal organization, or bureaucracy. Bureaucracy theoretically optimizes for perfect control and consistency. It achieves this through a strict division of labor, a clear hierarchy of authority, and impersonal rules. Weber warned that this creates an iron cage. The system becomes so perfectly structured, that it traps the individuals inside. Extreme rationality suppresses context. It kills creativity, reducing humans to cogs who execute rigid scripts to optimize for metrics instead of meaning. This presents a paradox. If perfect conformity creates a rigid, fragile system that dehumanizes its nodes, how does the social algorithm adapt to change? The system survives through deviance. Rule-breaking acts as a crucial feature, a release valve for built-up structural tension. Through Emile Durkheim's functionalist lens, a society with zero deviance is impossible because norms are never perfectly shared across all nodes. Instead of being an anomaly, deviance acts as a necessary stress test on the social architecture. When a node breaks the rules, the system is forced to react. This reaction creates a feedback loop that clarifies acceptable boundaries and drives necessary evolutionary change. Rule-breaking is the innovation engine that prevents the social algorithm from becoming completely brittle and obsolete. But this functionalist view assumes the system is neutral. The critical question is, who gets to define what counts as a useful innovation versus a punishable crime? Rooted in the work of Karl Marx, conflict theory argues that deviance is not inherently wrong. It is defined by those in power to protect their own interests. Consider two separate 7-year-old boys, Preston and Letarian. Both committed the exact same rule-breaking behavior by taking a vehicle on a joyride. This is a flowchart mapping how society algorithmically processed these acts. The input was identical, but selective enforcement applied different labels. One boy's story was treated as a harmless childhood mistake. The other resulted in a criminal record and public stigma. Deviance is rarely an objective reality. It is a negotiated meaning and a political classification imposed on a node. A social group only amplifies human intelligence if effort is preserved, incentives are aligned, and truth can survive power. To operate successfully within the social algorithm, you must architect your systems and your own status sets against these inevitable failure modes.